They had my hands behind my back on my own driveway, and the officer was already reaching for his cuffs. Behind him, the Homeowners Association president stood there with a clipboard and that calm little smile like she'd finally won. And all I could think was, this is insane, because the land they're standing on has been in my family since 1978. My name's Ethan Brooks. I'm 52 and I moved to the edge of a new development outside Nashville because I wanted quiet. Not country club quiet. Just regular quiet coffee in the morning, a little workshop in the garage, and nobody telling me how tall my grass is. The neighborhood was called Maple Hollow Estates, which should have been my first red flag. The sign at the entrance had this fancy stone wall fake lanterns, the whole vibe, and right under it, HOA rules posted like speed limits. I figured whatever I'm on the edge, I'm not trying to fight anyone. I'd heard of HOAs, but I also did my homework before I bought the place. My parcel wasn't in their Homeowners Association boundaries. My deed was clean, and my closing paperwork said it in plain English. The problem is, paperwork doesn't mean anything to people who run on ego. The first time I met her, she didn't introduce herself like a neighbor. She walked up like a manager, clipboard tight to her chest polo shirt with the community logo sunglasses on like armor. "Hi, I'm Sharon Caldwell, president of the Homeowners Association. We just want to welcome you and make sure you understand the community standards." She said standards like she was tasting the word. Then she looked past me straight at my garage and asked if that was a workbench area. I told her, yeah, I build small stuff, shelves, repairs, normal homeowner things. She smiled, then flipped a page. "We don't allow visible tools from the street." I laughed because I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. Within 2 weeks, I had my first violation notice taped to my front door, laminated like a restaurant menu. It claimed my trash cans were visible for longer than approved collection windows. The next one said my front porch light was not within approved color temperature. Color temperature. I didn't even know my porch light had an opinion. I walked to the little office by the entrance and asked what this was about. Sharon came out like she'd been waiting behind the door, already holding a stack of papers. I said, "Calm, ma'am, I'm not part of your homeowners association." She didn't blink. "Yes, you are. Everyone here is." I shook my head. "No. My lot isn't in your boundary map. I'm on the edge parcel. Different deed chain." She tilted her head like I'd spoken a foreign language. "Mr. Brooks, if you live in Maple Hollow, you follow Maple Hollow rules." That's when I realized what I was dealing with. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was someone who couldn't handle the idea that there was a house she couldn't control. It escalated the moment I did something that actually mattered: solar panels. I wasn't trying to be flashy, I was trying to lower my power bill. I hired a licensed installer, pulled permits, did it clean, and the day they went up I felt relief. The next morning Sharon was on my driveway before I even finished my coffee. She pointed up at my roof like it offended her personally. "You can't do that without architectural review approval." I kept my voice even. "Not your jurisdiction." She stepped closer and lowered her voice like we were negotiating. "I'm telling you, as president, remove them or we'll take action." I said, "Take what action?" And she answered like she'd been waiting her whole life to say it. "We'll involve the authorities." That night she didn't just send another notice, she sent a letter on Homeowners Association letterhead threatening fines, liens, legal remedies. I stared at it under my kitchen light and felt this slow heat climb up my neck. Because I knew what she wanted. She wanted me to flinch. She wanted me to blink first and sign whatever agreement she slid across a clipboard. I didn't. A week later, I'm taking out the trash, and 2 patrol cars roll up like it's a domestic call. Lights off, but that quiet, serious approach, doors closing, radios crackling. An officer walks up and says, "Sir, we got a complaint of trespassing on HOA property." I actually looked behind me to make sure he wasn't talking to someone else. My boots were on my own concrete. My trash can was in my own hand. I said, "Officer, this is my driveway." He glanced past me, and Sharon was right there on the sidewalk, arms folded, confident like she'd rehearsed this. She said loud enough for the whole street, "He's been refusing to comply with community rules. He's disruptive. He's illegally installed equipment. He's trespassing on our common property." I felt my stomach drop, not because I was scared of her, but because I realized she'd weaponized the system. You can be right and still get dragged into a mess when someone's willing to lie with a straight face. The officer asked if I had proof. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Yes, give me 1 minute." I walked inside, grabbed my closing folder, the one I never throw away, and came back out holding my deed like it was a shield. The officer took it, flipped through, and his eyebrows pinched together. Sharon leaned in, still smiling. "Those documents don't matter. Everyone here is under the Homeowners Association." The officer didn't even look at her. He looked at me and asked, "Do you have a survey?" And that was the moment I understood this wasn't going to be solved by me saying I'm not in your HOA louder. It was going to be solved by paper, lines, and somebody with a measuring wheel. Because Sharon wasn't listening to reality. She was trying to override it. Over the next few days, the neighborhood went cold. People stopped waving. A couple of folks who used to chat by the mailboxes suddenly found somewhere else to be. I'd walk outside and feel eyes behind curtains. And I'm going to be honest, that's the part that messes with you. Not the violations, not the threats. It's the social pressure, the idea that you're the problem because you're not letting someone push you around. I remember one evening sitting in my truck with the engine off, just staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't thinking, maybe I'm wrong. I was thinking, how much time am I about to lose to this? How many hours, calls, letters, just to be left alone? It felt like trying to hold back a tide with your hands. And I had this ugly thought, maybe it's easier to just keep my head down, pay whatever stupid fine she invents and move on. Then my phone buzzed. It was another notice, another final warning, and right under it she'd written in bold, "Remove solar panels or legal action will commence." Something about that snapped me out of it. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. If I gave her an inch, she'd take my whole roof, my whole property, my whole life. So I drove straight to the county records office the next morning. There's a woman behind the counter named Linda Harper, been there forever, the kind of person who can find a deed from 1972 like it's a grocery receipt. I told her my address and said I need to confirm boundary history. I'm getting harassed by the Homeowners Association. She didn't laugh. She didn't act surprised. She just typed, clicked, and squinted at her screen like she'd seen this movie before. Then she said, "Your parcel chain is interesting." And she turned the monitor so I could see. Back in the late 70s, my grandfather sold a big chunk of land to a developer. But he didn't sell all of it. He kept a handful of thin strips and odd corners pieces that looked worthless on paper but sat under important parts of the new neighborhood. The mailbox cluster, a section of the community trail, even part of what they called their common green space. I felt my mouth go dry. Because it wasn't just that I wasn't in the Homeowners Association, it was that the Homeowners Association had been acting like they owned land, that they didn't. Linda printed out a stack plats, easement notes, recorded maps. She pointed at a line and said, "This right here is a temporary easement. It's not permanent, and it has conditions." Conditions. Meaning if they didn't maintain it properly, if they exceeded their rights, they could lose it. I left that building with papers under my arm and a different kind of calm in my chest. Not confidence like a movie hero, real calm. The kind you get when you finally have something solid. Next step was simple. Survey. I hired an old surveyor named Ray Dawson, who looked like he'd been measuring land since before I was born. He showed up with a tripod, a measuring rod, and that quiet attitude of a man who doesn't care about neighborhood politics. He marked corners. He hammered stakes. Bright orange flags popped up along the edge of what everyone assumed was HOA common property. By lunchtime, Sharon was outside. She marched down the sidewalk and her little logo polo face tight eyes locked on those flags like they were insults. "What is this?" she snapped. Ray didn't even look up. "Survey." Sharon pointed at him. "You can't put those here. This is common area." I stepped forward. "It's not." She turned on me fast. "You are causing confusion and disorder." Then she did something that told me everything I needed to know about her. She walked right up to one of the stakes and yanked the flag out of the ground. Ray finally stood up and looked at her like she'd just slapped his mother. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, "do not touch my markers." Sharon smirked. Or what Ray nodded at my driveway camera. Or it becomes evidence. Her smile twitched, just for a second, because she knew. Over the next week it got uglier. She wrote my nephew Tyler a parking citation for being in my driveway. My driveway because she claimed guests must use visitor spaces. I recorded her saying it word for word, and I watched her realize too late that she'd said the quiet part out loud. Then I started digging. I hired a lawyer. Nothing dramatic, just a blunt guy named Mark Ellis who treats paperwork like a weapon. He filed records requests for homeowners association spending tied to common area improvements, and what came back made my skin crawl. They'd poured money into landscaping, signage, trail gravel, maintenance contracts, all on parcels they didn't own. They'd been billing residents for it, and Sharon had been treating it like her personal kingdom. Mark pointed to the easement clause and said, "They don't own it, they have limited use. And if they've exceeded that use, they've got exposure." Exposure is lawyer speak, for this can blow up in their faces. So we set a meeting, not a screaming match. A public board meeting, because that's where HOA people feel powerful. We announced it invited residents and asked the county rep to attend because there were boundary questions. I showed up with a folder so thick it barely closed. Deeds, plats, survey maps, easement terms, photos of Sharon pulling markers, video clips, records of violations, everything. Clean, dated, organized. Sharon walked in like she owned the room. She had her board members behind her like backup dancers. She started with her usual voice, calm, performative. "We have a homeowner refusing to comply, disrupting our community harmony and trespassing on common property." I didn't interrupt. I just waited until she finished and then stood up. And I didn't do a speech. I didn't do a dramatic monologue. I did what people like Sharon hate most: facts. I held up my deed. This is my parcel. I held up the survey. These are the boundaries. I held up the recorded map from the county. This is what's been on record since 1978. Sharon's eyes narrowed. "That's irrelevant. The homeowners association." My lawyer stepped in, polite as ice. "It's not irrelevant. It's controlling." Then he slid the easement paper across the table. He tapped the expiration and the conditions. He tapped the language about overuse, alteration, and interference. The room got quiet, not movie quiet, real quiet where you can hear someone swallow. A board member, a guy I'd never met, leaned forward and asked, "Sharon, is this true?" Sharon tried to laugh it off. "These are technicalities. We've always managed that land." Mark Ellis didn't raise his voice. "Managing and owning are not the same, and interfering with survey markers is not a technicality. It's a problem." Then he played the clip. Sharon on camera yanking the flag out like a child ripping a sign down. I watched her face change in real time. That confident glow drained out and got replaced with something tighter. Nervous. Because now it wasn't me versus her. It was her versus a room full of residents who suddenly realized they'd been paying into a system built on assumptions. Another resident spoke up, an older woman, soft voice but sharp words. "So all those fees, the landscaping, the trail repairs, you're saying we paid for improvements on land we don't even own?" Sharon snapped. "We did it for the community." And that's when the county rep finally spoke. He cleared his throat and said, "Ma'am, if this land is privately held, the homeowners association has no authority to enforce rules on it outside of any recorded easement rights." No authority. Sharon opened her mouth, then closed it, like a door slamming quietly. Someone else asked about the police call. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just said, "She called officers to my home and told them I was trespassing on my own driveway." That did it. A board member, one of her own, said, "Sharon, you can't keep doing this." She turned on him, furious. "Don't you dare undermine me." And right there, right in front of everyone, the mask slipped. Not a cartoon villain mask. A real one, the kind that shows you it was never about community standards. It was about control. They called for a vote. Not next month, not later. Right then, because the room was boiling and they could feel it. Sharon stood up, red in the face, clutching her clipboard like it could save her. She hissed, "This is a coup." The vote passed, and the last thing I saw as I walked out wasn't some cheering crowd. It was Sharon standing alone at the front table, papers shaking in her hands, realizing her authority stopped exactly where the property line began. Some lessons are simple when someone tries to rule your life with a clipboard. The best defense is the truth, in writing.